And welcome to Two Real Cinema Club. I'm James Rosica.
And I am Andres Clemente. And each week on Two Real Cinema Club, we watch two movies, one old, one new, and we try to draw some connections between the two. And this week we'll be looking at Jurassic Park from 2022, a new Jurassic Park film.
Jurassic Park.
Yeah, a new one.
Jurassic World. Yeah, it's not just a park anymore.
Oh my God, you're right. It's a world, and I'm gonna lead with a confession here in a moment. But I think it's called Dominion. Correct me if I'm wrong. Jurassic World Dominion.
Yeah, or like as a sentence. It feels like there should be a colon or a semicolon or at least a comma or something. But no, it's just Jurassic World Dominion. It's just a bunch of words.
A bunch of words. And the other film we're looking at is the 1954 classic, the original Godzilla, which is Gojira in Japanese, and it was directed by Ishiro Honda, who actually worked with Akira Kurosawa quite a bit, I think, as a cinematographer, and they were good friends. They made very different films over the years, but he was actually instrumental in some of Kurosawa's later films. So we'll be looking at those two films and talking about them, and I'm going to start with a Jurassic confession, and then after we talk about it, I'm going to have a Jurassic concession.
What is your confession? Confess.
My confession is
I've
never watched a Jurassic film before last week. And I've seen, clips, I've seen trailers, passing cable news in the middle of the night, maybe seen a scene or two, but I've never actually watched an entire film. So this was the first time I did that. So that's my confession. I'm guessing that you're an expert on Jurassic, all things Jurassic.
Well, I haven't seen all of them, but there are 6 films to catch up on. I have seen the original 3 or 4 times, maybe more, actually. So the original 93 Jurassic Park. I saw that twice in the cinema in 1993.
Wow.
And then seen it several times since. Did show it to the children a couple of years ago, and it was a bit too scary for them. So that's one of my parental regrets, actually.
Oops.
Making them sit through dinosaur violence at too young and impressionable an age.
Oh, I wasn't scared enough during this movie. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, later. But
I was scared by the wrong things, maybe.
Yeah.
Before we talk about the films, I'm going to do the socials.
Oh, please.
Because that's what you're supposed to do when you do a podcast. So thank you for listening. And if you want to get in contact with us, we are on Twitter at Two Real Cine Club. We're on Instagram at Two Real Cinema Club. We have a website now, tworealcinemaclub.com, and you can email us tworealcinemaclub@gmail.com. So there is no excuse. Track us down, have a look, see what we've typed, see what we took a picture of. Make some kind of abusive comment if you wish. Looking forward to that. So, Jurassic World Dominion. It's been, a big opening. 3rd film in the 2nd round of trilogies in this ongoing dino saga. 3rd film directed by Colin Trevorrow. And this time around written by him and Emily Carmichael, whose other previous credit is Pacific Rim Uprising. Yeah, make of that what you will. I'd
rather not.
Let me tell you about the story of Jurassic World Dominion. There's 2 strands in this story. It's that classic kind of Raymond Chandler strategy. 2 strands that end up being connected. It's largely a film about locusts. So locusts are devastating crops across the United States, and Laura Dern, as a kind of paleontologist and locust expert, comes in to investigate. She asks her old buddy from the first Jurassic Park movie, Sam Neill, to accompany her to get a sample of locust DNA from Biosyn, who are like a big biotech company, because she's been invited by Jeff Goldblum, also from the first Jurassic Park movie. He's working for Biosyn now, because he wants to let Laura Dern and the world know that these locusts, the devastating crops, were actually invented maybe by Biosyn. The other strand sees Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard living with a truculent 14-year-old girl, Maisie, who is hiding because apparently she's some kind of genetic wonder clone child, and there's a danger that she might be kidnapped because people might use her genes for something. And surprisingly, 15 minutes into the film, she is kidnapped by the people at Biosyn, remember them, So Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard, they go off to get her back, and they track her down to Malta, and from there they track her down to the Biosyn campus in the Dolomite Mountains in Italy. The campus there looks exactly like the Apple campus, and as far as I can tell, it seems to be run by Tim Cook, being played by Campbell Scott here. And at the Biosyn campus, they also then run into Sam Neill and Laura Dern, who've been collecting their locust evidence with help from Jeff Goldblum. And so the two bunches of groups of them, they all meet up because Tim Cook is so incensed by someone finding out about his locust secret that he sets fire to his genetically modified locusts. And I don't know what these locusts are made of, but they burn for hours. The locusts are on fire for absolutely hours, and they spread a wildfire through the forests of northern Italy. The whole facility goes up in smoke. There's a terrible disaster. The characters just about manage to escape in time. And by the way, there are some dinosaurs in the background of the movie. But overall, the story that we get told really has nothing to do with dinosaurs. In fact, it's been written in such a way that you could remove all dinosaur references and the story would still work about as well as it does now. So, not exactly what I was expecting from a Jurassic movie. Did you enjoy Jurassic World Dominion?
I always say no.
That's what I'm expecting. That's what I'm waiting for you to say.
And I put a pregnant pause in. I say, no. But it's not entirely true. I had an interesting experience with this film because
interesting. That's what my mother called everything that was bad. Interesting.
Yeah, exactly. It's such a harmless adjective and it's pointless, really. But I had an experience with the film. I normally don't sit among the people. I usually am, because I'm sort of trying to take notes. I'm either up front where there's enough light from the screen where I can write down some notes. And I like to see things big if I'm in the cinema, so I do want to sit close. Or I sit in the back and I'm toying with my phone to try and get just enough light to write notes. So this time I was actually it wasn't a big crowd, but there were probably 30 or 40 people there.
Not bad.
So I sat kind of right in the middle, and I wanted to laugh so badly because I thought there was just so much humor in this film, unintentionally. And it was one of those things where I thought people might be laughing too and we could have a good time with it, but no, people were taking it very seriously.
Ooh.
So that changed my mood entirely. So it was definitely a different experience being just more part of the crowd, and I just needed to, I think, have that experience to see how the other half lives, I guess, how people who want to see these films go out and see them and pay money.
The common folk, yes.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll come back to that later too, but yeah, my biggest problem was I couldn't tell how bad the acting was or how bad the script was and what the relationship was between the two. Like there were so many clunky lines and lots of just very surface dialogue between characters that it drove me crazy. And I thought it was laughable. And I think laughing at dialogue is a lot harder than laughing at some just ridiculous looking scene. I think people are probably more likely to laugh at that than at dialogue. So I had a really hard time figuring out, like, is it the script that's just dragging the actors down and there's no way to do it? Is it a directing issue? Like, you're not trying to make it feel more authentic. It's just the writing on the page felt so on the nose all throughout the film.
I must say, I felt like it was very much it's a script problem. We're at a stage now where computer graphics so wonderful that, largely I'm happy to suspend my belief and believe that there are dinosaurs running through Malta. Yeah, and there are some really enjoyable set pieces in the film. There's a chase through Malta on a motorbike and a jeep and hilariously, wonderfully, it ends with as Chris Pratt just manages to get his motorbike in the back of the plane as it takes off. We get like a split second of a dinosaur flying behind him on a motorbike in midair. Which is the one best image I want to take back from the whole film. There's like the dinosaur raid at night on the lookout station, and there's like a fight on a frozen lake. There's a whole bunch of great action set pieces that I think really work, and I think Colin Trevorrow can do those. And I think the cast. This is a 5-star cast. Chris Pratt, Sam Neill, Jeff Goldblum, Bryce Dallas Howard. I mean, these are people who are great actors who can deliver a great script. They've got the funny. These are all actors who can be tremendously funny, tremendously entertaining, very warm. They have the skills.
Yeah.
And I think the reason that the film as a whole really kind of falls flat, I think you have to narrow it down to the script.
Yeah.
Because here's a cast who could sell a great script, in quick order, but they haven't got the script to sell. You're exactly right about this leaden dialogue. I made a little note that basically every time a character meets another character, they tell each other the other character's name. It's constantly that Sam Neill meets Laura Dern for the first time in many years, and he tells her, "Oh, your name is Ellie Sadler." She said, exactly. You're Alan Grant." It's like people meeting at a conference with big badges on their chests. It's just absurd.
Exactly, but you have 30 years of films to sort of catch up on or be reminded of, I guess. And it's very funny because we just did this with Top Gun, and I thought they did a pretty good job with Top Gun. But there's this opening news segment that covers a lot of material about how humans are now living dinosaurs are living among us, and humans are sort of harvesting them and controlling them. So you sort of get up to date. So even though I've never seen a Jurassic film before, I had a pretty good update because of the newscast that sort of opened the whole thing. And that's a great way to get exposition out of the way, but it was also, not a strength in the script by any means. But I'm glad you sort of agree, because I just felt like the actors, they're definitely talented. They could do it.
Yeah,
but I felt that the script was so weak. The one person who can pull it off is Jeff Goldblum. I thought he was just great, and I think he's got this, just this presence where he can take bad material and that, he's funny. You're allowed to laugh at the film when Jeff Goldblum's in it because he's so good, and he can take that script and make it funny. But there were other parts that I wanted to laugh at because they were so bad, and I didn't have the permission structure to do that with the audience I was in. So
I think a lot of the pleasure I took out of the film was the fun of seeing the original 1993 cast back together again. Yeah. It's especially fun because Jeff Goldblum seems to have exactly the same outfit that he was wearing in 1993, like exactly the same. Just fantastic. Why, if it works for you, why change it? Yeah. And there is something kind of actually quite fond and endearing about the elderly Sam Neill and Laura Dern. I mean, they're not elderly, but they're knocking on a bit. But about them kind of getting back together, and there's a bit of proper warmth and and it's an enjoyable chemistry between those characters. But the big difference between the way their characters worked in the original and the way that they are written in this current film is that in the new film, they're not allowed to do anything clever or resourceful. In the original film, Sam Neill and Laura Dern, they're brought along to the dinosaur island because they're experts and they know all about dinosaurs. Yeah. And they're the ones with the scientific knowledge that means that they know how to escape the dinosaurs, and they know what the dinosaurs' weak points will be and what to look out for. And so it's their knowledge and resourcefulness that moves the story on, and it gives them something to do. Whereas in this film, I think no one's allowed to be clever. Laura Dern is told to get a DNA sample of a locust, and then she's given a key card by Jeff Goldblum to get into the secret lab. And then the guy leading the tour says, "I'm going to leave you alone for half an hour. You can wander around and do what you like." And so it's just Laura Dern, obeying a recipe. She's given a set of instructions. She follows the instructions. She does the thing that she's asked to do. And it's just terribly mechanical, and just doesn't allow people to feel kind of sparky or intelligent. It doesn't let people surprise you or come up with a strategy. Their strategy throughout most of the film, when they find the dinosaurs or they find the locusts, is just it's either run away or it stands still, or it stands still for a bit, look at the dinosaur, and then run away. Yes, it's such a shame. I tell you what, it reminded me of. It's like the way that characters are introduced, I think, makes such a difference to the way that you enjoy a film. It reminded me a little bit of Terminator 2. Whatever people might say about James Cameron, he's a really, really good script writer. He really knows what he's doing. I don't know whether you remember Terminator 2, the way that the characters were introduced in that movie.
I don't.
So when John Connor is introduced, as this kind of surly teen, you see him hacking. So he's got a bit of savvy with technology, and he's riding this motorbike, which comes into the story later. And when Sarah Connor is introduced, she's doing chin-ups in this psychiatric hospital, so that you know that she is tough but deranged. And the way that characters are introduced tells you something about them, which then comes into the story. Whereas the way that the characters are introduced in this film, it's just uninspiring and tells you nothing about them. You see that Chris Pratt is riding a horse trying to catch a dinosaur, and that's it. He never rides a horse in any of the rest of the film. He doesn't really catch any dinosaurs in the rest of the film. He's just kind of, it's just that they wanted to get a scene of him riding a horse. Or Bryce Dallas Howard is seen sort of releasing some dinosaurs from a kind of dino farm.
Yeah, Stegosaurus, baby Stegosaurus.
Right, yeah. So she kind of does this at the beginning of the film, but then it kind of doesn't display any skills that help her solve a problem later on. Doesn't really do any of that activity later on in the film. When at one point in the film she says to Campbell Scott playing the Tim Cook character, that when he says that he gives the dinosaurs instructions by using electric shocks in their head, she says, "Oh, that sounds a bit cruel, doesn't it? Have you thought about that?" And then half an hour later, she is literally tasering a dinosaur in the eye. Yeah. It's like I don't understand her character. What? So because I think the reason I don't understand is because they haven't really quite figured out who she is or why we want to spend 2.5 hours with her. I think it's this fundamental problem with the characters and the way that they've been introduced and figured out.
Yeah. Well, you went through that long list of things that happen and these set pieces that happen, but it's all very superficial ultimately. Like nothing really sticks. And I don't feel like that it doesn't actually feel like they're really going through much of a joint experience. I was trying to figure out the timeline of this film because, they're in Italy, they're in Malta, they're all over the place. I've never seen anyone stop for a bite to eat or go to the bathroom. There was no one ever slept in the film, so it feels like it was just a couple hours of roaming around the earth, battling dinosaurs and evil corporate types. But I had a really hard time seeing them all together, and they are split stories at one point when it goes back and forth. It's an epic kind of film, so you get 10 minutes with one thing, you've forgotten what was going on in the B plot, and then that plot comes back to you, and then you forget about the A plot, and it sort of just it lacked flow, and it lacked this sort of together experience, I think, for the characters as a result. I think one thing that really bothered me, it just wasn't scary enough. I didn't find the dinosaurs that scary. I didn't find Campbell Scott was lovely as the Tim Cook characters you said, but he wasn't that sinister, and it was so easy to get around their campus and undermine their defense systems.
They have terrible security there, don't they?
Terrible security for something that's supposed to be so airtight. So stuff wasn't scary, and the monsters. I've seen this so many times now, where the dinosaur's head is within 2 inches of the human head, and just slobbering and just razor sharp teeth, and they're ready to eat the actor, the character. It never happens. They're just not dangerous. They make a lot of noise. There's a lot of barking, but there's no bite. So I just, you can't do that again and again and expect me to be scared of the dinosaur. There's no decapitations, no dismemberment, no dinosaur masticating on human limbs or anything of the sort. So it's just, they're not scary. And the final battle isn't even between humans and dinosaurs. It's sort of between these two. I don't know what they were called. They were beyond Tyrannosaurus Rex. It was this new
Gigantosaurus A, Gigantosaurus
exactly.
B. Yeah.
So it's interesting that they kicked the humans out of that final conflict. It actually ends up being one bad dinosaur against another.
Yes, where it's like the stakes are not entirely obvious, and the way that it affects our characters doesn't seem to have any bearing really. It's something that happens in the background, isn't it? While they run away to get in the chopper. To be fair, I do remember quite vividly one person in the background being eaten by a dinosaur. It's after Chris Pratt releases a whole load of dinosaurs out into the streets of Malta. And one of these dinosaurs is wandering through a square in Valletta, and he just bends over and eats a man. But the reason I remember it is because the man that he eats is on one of those really annoying electric scooters. So I didn't mind that he was eaten, in fact.
He deserved it.
He deserved it.
Well...
There are 2 characters, I think, who actually come off not too badly from this film.
Okay.
One of them is Maisie, the 14-year-old girl.
Yeah.
I saw this film with a 14-year-old girl, and actually her portrayal of a sort of a bright but slightly moody 14-year-old girl seemed extremely believable to me. I thought it was credible, and I thought she did well with what she was given to do.
And I sense that maybe the next Jurassic film will probably feature her a bit more.
Yeah, I guess I presume that she's being groomed to be another,
And there's Jurassic this, star. I mean, her story is important because I think there's this entire theme of motherhood or parenting in this film It's very strange though, because last I knew, dinosaurs were more like reptiles and probably didn't give much of a shit about their own babies and whatnot. Where in
Yeah.
this film, they're trying to make them like, maybe it's because they've been living with humans, they've become more mammalian and they care about their young. So when Maisie is kidnapped, also a dinosaur named Beta, I think she calls him Beta,
Right.
is
Yeah.
kidnapped from, and they just happen to sort of live nearby Maisie and Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard. Um, so there's this sort of theme about motherhood and like raising one another, and you don't have to be the biological mother. I think that was the case, or the biological father to be a good parent, or you don't have to. I think Beta was a clone, I guess, right, from the mother or something like that.
I
So you don't have to be alive born, I guess, to have a relationship with your mother or whatnot. There's this mothering theme or this parenting theme that they're trying to get at, but it doesn't really work because I don't think dinosaurs really ever operated on that level. So that was
yeah.
bizarre.
I feel like that theme kind of doesn't, yeah, it doesn't really quite land. I wrote my notes here, theme question mark. The only theme that I could find for the movie is Tim Cook is bad. I think that's the underlying theme of the movie. That's the only
Oh,
thing I took home from it. The other character I think actually comes out not too bad is Kayla Watts. Who is DeWanda Wise, who's like the pilot.
she's a pilot.
Who's,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
who's this kind of sort of tough, sassy
Yep.
pilot, yeah, is kind of a very watchable character, although still underserved by the script. There's a scene where her beloved plane gets smashed into the side of it on the top of a glacier or like a frozen
Yes.
lake.
Yep.
And they crawl out, and I don't know. I was kind of inwardly cursing because you would think that any scriptwriter worth their salt would have written some kind of a quip or an emotional line or something there. But all she says, she looks at the plane, and she says, "That's my baby." And then they get on with the story, and I was thinking, oh, that really feels like a placeholder line where they were
Yeah.
going to come up with something a little bit wittier or
yeah.
fresher or cleverer on set, and they never did. And it's so. And the other thing that's terribly disappointing about her character is that so she's gay, but her being gay only comes up in one
Oh, yeah,
very
that's right.
easily cut line at the end of one scene. It's such a cynical sort of box ticking to get an LGBTQ character in your movie.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think I feel like there was a meeting at some point where someone said, "Have you got a woman in this movie? Tick.
Yeah.
Have you got a black person in this movie?
Yeah.
Tick. Have you got an LGBTQ character in this movie? Oh, tick." And then they should have asked, "Is that all the same person?"
Yeah.
and it is. It's kind of frustrating.
Yeah.
And I presume that Jurassic World Dominion is looking to make a great deal of money from markets where LGBTQ characters will not be welcome. So they've incorporated the character in such a way that she can be trimmed and cut very, very easily
Sure.
with minimal disruption to the film, which it just strikes me as so disappointingly cynical.
Yeah. And that is a throwaway line unless you think of the theme as being motherhood. Like that plane is her baby, and she's taking care of that just as the way as
Oh,
like
very
Pratt
good.
and Howard are taking care of Maisie, and the dinosaur's taking care of its child somehow. It's just I think that's just it was kind of an obvious theme, I think. So maybe that line is in there for that.
I see.
Give you
As
the theme
usual,
there.
your reading is much deeper than mine.
I'm being very generous on this film. You will probably laugh at me with what I say here in a few minutes, but yeah, you've got to be generous to look for, I think, the zeitgeist in the film, I guess, or what the film is really about, or what the film is accidentally about. I think it might be accidental for me.
What is this film accidentally about?
I think it's accidentally about a couple of things. I think one of my favorite images is this swarm of burning, ravenous locusts, and I think that's a great metaphor for environmental disaster. That seemed really scary to me because if they're not going to eat you all the way to hell, they're going to burn you with their dying carcasses all the way to hell. So I thought, I think there's a good idea there. There's a great idea because in the Biosyn world and Campbell Scott's mind, there's this idea that you could get these locusts to eat the corn of their competitor companies. Like Biosyn is creating this certain strain of corn. And if you're not growing that strain of corn, they're going to send out the locusts to eat whatever you're growing. And I love that corporate criticism, that corporate critique that's in there. I think that was pretty well done. I don't think they spent a whole lot of time on it, but I like that idea. There are a couple of good ideas in this film. The biggest problem is that the stakes are never very real. There's like tons of adversity, but it's all, as you said before, it's too easily overcome. You can get into all the secret places without any effort whatsoever. So that as a result, it's just nothing stuck to me. It was superficial. This is a very, very surface film. But I dug a little bit, and I think I know what it's kind of about.
Right.
And I think it's about, and it's interesting that you made the diversity comment, because they ticked a box there, but I think this film is kind of about immigration and living with different people. And I don't know, again, I don't know if that's accidental or intentional, but the dinosaurs are here. They're living among us now. And some people are exploiting them. Some people are even, trying to kill them. But it's a reality, and it's a changing world. And I think that that's what they're trying to go after. It seems a little over optimistic, perhaps, but I think there's a message buried in there. And this is not cinema. This is not a thinking person's movie, I don't think. But it's really much more like this, I don't know, self-sequeling intellectual property that we're going to see again and again because it makes money worldwide. But I think at first I felt like a snob, and like there's some ideas in here that could be great if they were really explored, but it has to be a different film. And then I turned around a little bit, and this is the concession: is that I think films like this, I'd call them like the stained glass church windows of yore. It's like you're telling stories to teach people stuff, and I think there is some kind of immigration message in here, or some sort of diversity message in here. That it's, again, everything in this film is kind of superficial, but it's almost too superficial. They don't spend enough time on it, exploring it, and none of those like on-the-nose pieces of dialogue tell you this. But I think this is where we need ideas in films. Like in this is a massive hit film. It's going to reach a huge audience worldwide. And I'm starting to think, well, this is exactly the type of film that should have a good message in it. An art film is going to play to a small audience, and they're already thinking about these things anyway. But if you can get these kinds of ideas into the mainstream cinema and the box office blockbusters, then
it's good. It's good. It does worry me a little bit that the theme that if you spot this theme, then the take-home message you take is that we're going to have to live with people who are different to us, and what's more, those people will probably eat my children and steal my electric scooter.
Exactly. Yes, I mean it's got both sides of the immigration issue buried in it right there for all to see, I guess. So that's what that was what I took away, and I. Again, I opened by saying, I wanted to be laughing at this film the whole time, and I really don't like films like this, but people obviously go out and see them, or they put it online and they watch it. So these are popular films, and they can have good messages, but I might be totally wrong. That might not be what the filmmakers had in mind at all. But, there's got to be some touchstone in present-day culture or the present-day state of the world that resonates through the film, and that's what I got. I don't know if
that's a really nice way to think about it. I think actually I'm impressed. I wish I shared your goodwill and optimism. I wonder whether I worry that there's an awful lot more selling toys than there is holding hands and togetherness in this film. But may I ask you something?
I will say
you're right. It's immigration and motherhood. Is what this film is about.
I think it's those things.
But it hides it very well.
It does hide it, and again, that final confrontation is bad monster against bad monster. It's not human. It's not the American crew or anything like that. So you begin to think, oh, that's really cynical, because you're just pitting the more vulnerable against each other, or the people that you're trying to control, you're pitting them against each other. And then the evangelical thing that I saw in all this. I've been listening to a little bit of podcast on evangelists. It's like anything can happen. It doesn't matter. Jesus is going to come and save us all. So all this genetic engineering, all this trashing of the planet doesn't matter at all, because, eventually Jesus is going to make everything all right. And I think that's in there too.
That is terrifying.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
So we'll probably hear from some of the evangelicals, but... So I got that too, but I really feel I do like the corporate critique in there. I just wish they were more evil, and I wish either the environmental theme had been explored a bit more, or just this corporate dubiousness explored a bit more, or if the motherhood and the immigration themes are really there, I wish they'd explored them more. But again, it's a big picture. It's a popcorn movie, so maybe it's not supposed to function on that level.
It's a popcorn movie full of these kind of dropped strands, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are some ideas that are unearthed, but then then dropped again. Well, let's have a break. And then we'll see whether we can find any kind of metaphor or any comment on the world in 1954's Godzilla. Let's see if there's got anything in there. We'll be back in a minute.
And we are back from Jurassic World. Next, we talk about...
Thankfully.
Yes, thankfully. Next, we talk about Gojira, or Godzilla. That's the original Godzilla film from 1954. And just during the break, we were talking about how the original Jurassic film, Jurassic Park, was strong. Like, it had a meaning. And I think I'm going to say the same thing about this Godzilla film. I've seen a lot of the Godzilla films, and I think that... ultimately, when you over-sequelize these things, they just get weaker and weaker. And I suspect that's going on in the Jurassic World. The Godzilla films, I have seen a lot more of them on cable TV as a kid, and there wasn't a lot to them. But I'm going to say that this film, like the original Jurassic, really strong film.
Yeah.
And it's got the original ideas. It's fresh. I think that, that I can understand why you want to make sequels and visit the same characters and the same... issues, but I think generally it's better to just show some restraint and say, look, we've made a great film. We don't need to make 16 more films.
I think more than 16, haven't there? There have been
like
30 or more, haven't there? I mean, incredible number of Godzilla films. Unbelievable.
And Ishiro Honda was involved in many of them. If you look at the IMDb on him, you'll see that he made a lot of Godzilla films. Godzilla versus this, Godzilla versus that.
It's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, and it's kind of, I mean, for me, it's a little bit of a pity that it gets overexposed and oversaturated, because, as I said, it's a very good film. It's very much a noir film. I think that was really surprising to me, just how much of a film noir it felt like. Obviously influenced by some of the American films going on at the same time. 1954, so we're within 10 years of the end of World War II, and I felt like I was right in the tone and the story world in the credits before I'd even seen an image. The credits do not feature any images. It's just text on black background, white text on a black background, with a really pulsing score, mostly strings, but there are sounds of war in there and moaning and creatures yelling, and it's just, some of it's with instruments, but I think some of it are other audio effects, and it just sets the tone before you even see
Incredible sound design, isn't it? Just amazing. I read up on this, actually. Apparently the sound of Godzilla, which is this spine-tingling sound right at the beginning of the film, apparently they experimented with all sorts of different ways to make the sound, and they recorded like real live animals and sound effects and stuff. And what they went with, this is the sound of a double bass that's being rubbed with a leather glove.
Oh, God.
Apparently that is the sound of Godzilla, and then they slow down the tape. Yeah. But it's just this incredible sound, and it does sound kind of organic.
Yeah.
And I suppose those strings on the double bass will be like the vocal cords of a giant monster. I mean, I can see how they've come to think of this, but it's just an amazing sound.
Yeah. Opening images of the ocean in our rear view. It's funny because the opening image of Jurassic World Dominion was sort of a false promise. There was this massive sea dinosaur that comes up and eats an entire crate full of crabs and tips over the fishing boat as these guys are trying to bring in their catch. And we never saw that creature.
We never see it again, yes.
We never went. I don't think we went into the ocean again. We went underwater a little bit with some of the dinosaurs, but whereas this image comes back in the end and you're just sort of reversing it. But it's in our rear view at the beginning. Some Japanese sailors are exposed to a radiation explosion in a storm. One ship goes down. Another ship goes out to try and look for survivors. That ship goes down. And suddenly, the various village fishermen around the islands are not getting any fish. And there's already this myth of Godzilla out there that after the fish disappears, this creature Godzilla will come and eat the humans. Which is new to me. I don't remember that Godzilla preceded the actual this actual event. I thought it was created out of the sort of atomic bomb, but actually sort of this tradition of this creature sort of battling with the village fishermen. And there's this one moment where they're talking about the loss of tradition that I really liked. because we're going to see a lot of like sort of anti-nuclear, anti-war themes, but the only it seems like they used to sacrifice young girls to Godzilla in a dance. I thought that was really interesting, and then they've lost that tradition. Only this dance of the procedure or the process before you sacrifice the girl. Only that dance lives on, and some people are bemoaning the fact that Japanese culture has changed. And that was interesting. So I liked that theme. You got to go with it. This is a 1954 film, so the miniatures are all over the film, and it's adorable. It seems kind of quaint at times, and it might not seem as scary as what we've got now in terms of CGI and computer-generated stuff. But I'll talk about how I was more scared about this than I was about Jurassic Park.
I mean, those miniatures are beautifully made, in fact, aren't they? I mean, it's just really, it's a beautiful miniature Tokyo.
Yeah.
Such craftsmanship. It's fantastic.
And this is 70-something years, almost 70 years ago, something like that. So Godzilla's sort of traveling around, wreaking havoc. People are lost. Homes are lost. A helicopter, very funny-looking helicopter, is lost. But they determine it's not a typhoon. It could be Godzilla. So an emergency research team has to come together. This was very reminiscent of Jaws. The scientists want to go out and explore, and they're sort of led by Dr. Yamane. And I was really worried about the scientists because they did not seem like they had radioactive protection, and they were just walking around in this destroyed village, and they were picking up lots of radioactivity. And you'd think, boy, these are the Japanese. They've just been through this 10 years before. Why aren't they properly protected?
Put a suit on.
So I was worried about that. So the villagers end up running around. They're trying to avoid Godzilla. It seems like H-bomb testing has forced Godzilla to come from its underwater cave, and Godzilla is pissed, and he's irradiated. And they've proved that it comes from the Jurassic era. Connection to Jurassic World. Public officials don't want to scare the public, so they're not really announcing that Godzilla's out there on the prowl. And
as if the public wouldn't spot him.
Yeah. He starts attacking. And there's this idea to kill Godzilla by any means necessary because they want to keep shipping open and make sure that he doesn't destroy the economy and the culture. This film sort of has a group protagonist. I don't really feel like it was any one human who led the story. You've got Dr. Yamane, who's researching dinosaurs, and he wants to deal with Godzilla but not necessarily kill him. I think his understudy is Dr. Serizawa, who's creating this thing called an oxygen destroyer. And he's the fiance of Emiko, who is Dr. Yamane's daughter, but she's sort of picking up with this salvage ship worker, whose name Ogata, I believe. So they all kind of play fairly sizable roles, but I wouldn't say anyone is actually the protagonist. It's more like the Japanese people against this threat of Godzilla. And Serizawa is the real deal. I love the Bunsen burners, the stemware, dials, gadgets. He's got all this stuff in his laboratory as he's creating this oxygen destroyer, which we'll talk about at the end of the film.
And this eye patch that he has really makes him look like a character out of a video game somehow, doesn't it? It's really it's kind of strong, kind of crazy scientist vibes.
Yeah. Here's what I liked about this film that I didn't like in Jurassic World was that there's one point where Godzilla is marauding Tokyo, and he has an entire toy train in his sock puppet mouth, and I thought that was scary. I mean, he's just eating not only the people, he's eating the damn train car, and it's a plastic doll doing it, but it was so much more scary I thought than Jurassic World because this guy actually eats people and other stuff. There's they build a wire fence around Tokyo to try electrocute Godzilla, which is, I think that's sort of the classic scene that everyone's seen. He's sort of walking through these electric lines and sparking, and he actually sort of starts to irradiate. His back fins are doing things, and he can freeze or put things on fire with his breath. So Godzilla's got some talents that are very clearly scary, and he really... Godzilla's mad. It's personal in this film. It's like the H-bomb is impersonal. It just gets dropped. Godzilla, he really wants to mess people up and cause destruction. It's interesting, though. It's also, even though the filmmakers are really struggling with the technology of the day to make things seem real. It's slow and deliberate. I think if they'd had lots of quick cuts, it probably would have looked more real. But the decision was to sort of embrace the low tech and just make it work. And with the technology of like Jurassic World, you could actually, ironically, I think you could slow things down. It would probably be more believable. That it's this mixture of high tech stuff and quick cuts that almost makes it look less believable and less scary. I think I just want to be scared if I'm going to see these films. There should be some sort of a threat to me, even in the seat in the movie theater at my home. So I was a little taken aback by that. I mean, I much preferred the slow action of the miniatures than quick cuts of like these entirely CGI filmed Jurassic World. So it was interesting. It was interesting.
I must say, I was going to say that I mean, it's kind of famously looks ludicrous when you see it in short bursts. So, it's just a man in a suit. I can remember seeing Godzilla movies as a child, and my mother complaining at the screen, "Oh, it's just a man in a suit. Why is that scary?" But one of the notes that I made when I was watching this actually was that it's almost there's a real physicality to it. It's and it's not necessarily realistic, but that physicality gives it a real kind of sense of, I don't know if it's like threat or just of being there. What it reminds me of, there's that very brief dance that we see about the remembering sacrificing the maiden to Godzilla, and we've got people wearing kind of these strange masks who are obviously being representations of Godzilla in the dance. And then we have a similar representation of death as Godzilla in a man wearing a different kind of suit later on in the film. They kind of mirror each other. Mm-hmm. There's something about these practical effects which I think are actually more visceral than kind of CGI and lights. And there's just something about the fact that you could reach out and you could touch. There was a real Godzilla that you could touch, even though it was a man in a suit. Yeah. That I think is what gives it this kind of tactile quality. So you end up with some unforgettable images. I think it's just brilliant. Yeah. Ludicrous, but brilliant.
But sadly for the people, a lot of their solutions do not work. The electrocution doesn't work. They've tried routing them out with airplanes. That doesn't work. So it comes to Serizawa and his oxygen destroyer that they decide to use. It sort of like vaporizes the creatures, and Emiko, the daughter of the doctor, has seen it. She was terrified by it, but she's the only one who's seen this thing in action, and we sort of see what it does at the very end of the film. It involves some deep sea diving, though, and it's interesting because her Serizawa, who is Emiko's fiance, is going to be joined by Ogata, her new boyfriend, possibly a future fiance. He wants to marry her too. And they get into these old suits, and they go down with the oxygen destroyer. They sort of hunt out Godzilla in its own world. They're using a Geiger to find Godzilla because Godzilla is so radioactive. And of course, Serizawa is sort of conflicted because he doesn't want his invention to be used to cause more harm. So I like this. There was a Prometheus theme in there where he was stealing this technology and he was using it, but it was going to destroy the world. So he ends up sort of going down with his invention, but taking Godzilla out in the process. So he dies. He sort of sacrifices himself and has destroyed the recipes for the oxygen destroyer. So we do see this final scene where Godzilla comes up for one final scream and then sort of vaporizes down into a dinosaur skeleton. The immediate danger has passed. It's interesting. Godzilla looks like a plastic toy in a little jar of Alka-Seltzer at this point, just kind of bubbling away, and the skeleton is there. It ends kind of on a sequel setup where Dr. Yamane is saying he can't believe that Godzilla is the only one of its kind. So, as we know, it's not going to be. But it closes back on the calm over the ocean. This time we're going into the ocean. It's got that bookend image from the opening. So it feels very satisfying. And it's definitely about, the anti-nuclear movement and soft power to a certain extent over war. I do worry that, the great metaphor and even the achievement is sort of dumbed down and detracted by so many sequels. You just see it again and again. So instead of having the power of the one film that really resonates, I feel like it gets watered down with too many sequels. But yeah, there's great themes of like humans unleashing Pandora's box and then Only one
Yeah.
scientist really is willing to, be aware of the consequences and say no. The madness has to stop here. So, great film. I really enjoyed it.
I think it's really great. It is full of, apart from Serizawa, the only person who comes up with a solution for the Godzilla problem, it's just people reacting to the unstoppable, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's very quickly obvious that there's nothing you can do about Godzilla. He's unstoppable, too big, too strong. All we can do is cower. There's this, there's a whole bunch of, real kind of pathos scenes. There's a kind of a mother and her children sheltering, like under like the roof of a building as Godzilla advances, and she says, "Oh, we'll be joining your father soon." You have to presume, well, was the father killed in the war?
Yeah.
And I don't think you get any ray of sunshine. You don't see those characters again, do they? I mean, I think they are killed. I mean, it's and it's rare that you'll see a movie where the makers are brave enough to murder a whole family.
Yeah,
but
they do. They do, and that's why the threat is there and it's real, and
absolutely,
that's why it's so much more meaningful.
And even for the survivors, when the scientists are inspecting them in this kind of makeshift refugee camp, and they run their Geiger counter over the children, and they're all radioactive. It's it's a proper tragedy. Clearly, it's a film about being victim of nuclear war. And one of the characters literally says, "Oh, not again! I barely escaped Nagasaki."
Yeah.
So I mean, they're not hiding the themes for this film. They're wearing it on their sleeves. This is clearly what it's about. Today, nearly 70 years later, though, I think it works just as well as being a story about climate change as well.
Yeah.
That there are a few people who are trying to keep the shipping lanes open, but the rest of us are just cowering in the face of the unstoppable.
Yeah.
And it's sobering and sad that the film is as contemporarily relevant as it was back in 1954.
Mm-hmm. And it's it does operate on the level of monster film, and I guess there were probably earlier monster films, definitely the old Frankensteins and Draculas and things like that. So it does operate as a monster film, but it's a different superficiality. This is also like a mass audience kind of film, but its superficiality is dark and meaningful, and they're really addressing history immediately. This is 10 years from World War II.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think, yes, it's surface, but it's not surface, meaningless surface. It's just a very clear message about nuclear power and environmental degradation.
It's interesting what you were saying about it being a noir movie, because a lot of the film does happen at night. And it's beautifully photographed. And if it had been made in colour, I think it wouldn't have the same impact, actually. There's something about it. I don't know whether it means that it has a little bit of the look of a war era newsreel.
Yeah.
Or whether it's just that the starkness of the photography means that you are not distracted by the colour. You have less reason to feel taken out of the experience and recognise, oh, it's just a man in a suit.
Yeah.
The famous scenes you were talking about when Godzilla is being electrocuted by the massive power lines, you get mist and steam sparking up everywhere, and kind of that's when Godzilla is at his most frightening, when you kind of can't really see him. It's like that first glimpse of Godzilla when you just see his face appear over the mountain ridge and you don't see the rest of his body.
Yeah.
Or the scene when he's dissolved at the end, and all you can see is just this massive figure in the kind of the fog of the ocean. It's it's a great example of how the less you see, the more frightening something becomes.
Precisely.
They've really taken advantage of what little resources they had.
Yeah. And I think color would have been an option probably in 1954. And some of the later films are definitely color. The ones that I saw on TV as a kid are definitely color. And I think they look less real as a result. I think they're also moving towards looks like more of a claymation style by the time the late 50s and early 60s come along. And those films don't look as realistic to me or as frightening. So it does benefit from a couple of things there. Yeah, definitely the black and white, and also, as you said, just not seeing the monster, because it would look cheaper, I think, obviously, and less scary if you saw it too much. But you definitely see full shots of Godzilla all the time, but it's a while. It's probably 30 or 40 minutes into the film before you really see the whole picture and all of his menace.
It's beautifully done. Far less cheesy, I think, than anyone would expect coming to Godzilla if they only know him from either the cable TV daytime movies or the pop culture icon.
Yeah.
You know, there's something really kind of stomach-churningly frightening about Godzilla. They had to be doing something right if the film spawned 30 sequels, you know. So
yes.
absolutely. This is a home run.
Yeah. It is. It's a bizarre bit of nostalgia too, though, because I mean, obviously, it's such a horrifying theme and a horrifying predicament. But I loved watching it as a kid. I loved watching it again now. So I felt uncomfortable being nostalgic for it. But certainly a masterpiece, and interesting that Honda did more films with Kurosawa, because they just seem like totally different filmmakers, but they were apparently lifelong buddies, and Honda worked a little bit on some of the later films of Kurosawa, like in the 1980s and stuff. So they both had long careers, lived to be healthy old men, and obviously both of them talented filmmakers.
So if you're going to have a nightmare tonight, I presume it's going to be Godzilla featuring, and not the Gigantosaurus pecs or whatever it was we were supposed to be frightened of in the Jurassic film.
Yeah, I can't get that idea of the train car in Godzilla's mouth out of my mind, and I'll wake up laughing when I see a massive dinosaur head come within inches of biting off some A-list actor's heads. It's not going to happen. The actor will survive. The character will survive. It's not scary.
Yes, they always survive.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we seem to have survived to the other end of another episode. What a seamless segue that was. I feel like such a pro. That was good, wasn't it? It's almost like I've been planning it. And two monstrous films. We have been the Two Real Cinema Club. Do join us next time when we're going to be watching other two movies. Until then, check us out on the web and see you next time. Thanks. Goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.